In 1974, as a part of an art exhibit, 23-year-old Marina Abramovic invited the public to use a variety of 72 different items on her body in any way that they wanted. This exhibit lasted 6 hours. She supplied them with scissors, scalpels, an axe, and even a gun. In the end, she was left battered, bruised, bleeding, and almost publicly murdered, all for the sake of art. Hi, my name is Tasha, and this is my series White Rabbit, where we deep dive into anything spooky, odd, or just interesting while I apply some special effects makeup. This week's story is about Marina Abramovic's Rhythm Zero performance that tested humanity and humanity failed. I will be turning myself into a painted work of art in honor of today's story. If you like this type of content, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm trying to make it to 200 followers and I need you. So subscribe. Now that we've discussed my needs,
Excuse me?
let's discuss my nightmare, which is basically this entire Rhythm Zero performance. But first, let's talk some history. Marina Abramovic was born November 30th, 1946 in the capital of Serbia. Her parents were very politically active and very busy, especially in the beginning of Marina's life. So Marina actually lived with her maternal grandmother, and that's who raised her. When Marina was 6, her mother actually got pregnant, and when she gave birth to Marina's baby brother, she sent for her to come back home. So Marina went from being raised by her grandmother to being raised majority by her mother. Marina's mother was described as very strict, especially when it came to religion, cleanliness, and order. Marina's father was basically described as an absentee parent. Although I know it's not ideal, I feel like a lot of fathers during this time were absentee parents. They were responsible for more traditional roles, bringing home the bacon, and it was basically the mother's entire responsibility to raise the children. Both of Marina's parents were pretty unemotional, and you've got to remember, Marina was born the year after World War II ended. It was very common to be stoic and unemotional. These people had just lived through the trauma of war. And Marina said that her household was run like the military. She wasn't even allowed out past 10 until she was like in her 20s. Although Marina's mother was really cold when it came to expressing her feelings, one thing she did always encourage was art. She always encouraged Marina to express her feelings through her artwork. In 1970, Marina attended the Fine Arts Academy in Belgrade. While she was there, she met some young conceptual artists, and she really was intrigued by the way that they did art. Conceptual art is when the concept behind the art is more important than the actual art itself. It's all about the meaning. It's meant to evoke emotion and a reaction. It's meant to make people uncomfortable. I mean, like, really, because some of her art is quite uncomfortable. But these artists really inspired Marina, so she started to experiment with her own body in her artwork. Marina ended up flying to Amsterdam for this gathering of performance artists from all over. There she met a German artist named Ule, who she would fall madly in love with, and they performed many pieces together. 22 pieces together to be exact. Their performances were interesting and odd. I believe it was their first performance together where they were hitting their naked bodies, like crashing their naked bodies into each other for an hour. For one performance, they shoved cigarette filters into their nostrils and they like connected mouths and inhaled each other's exhale until basically they almost passed out. It ended up being like 19 minutes. And then there was one performance where they were standing facing each other and they had a bow and arrow in between them. Ule had the arrow pointed toward Marina's heart, and she grabbed the bow and leaned backwards. And actually they both leaned backwards at the same time, with an arrow facing her heart. They stayed there for 4 minutes. The thing about Marina's art is that a lot of it was very dangerous. Specifically, her collection called The Rhythms was very dangerous. Rhythm 10 consisted of a knife game with 20 different knives of various shapes and sizes that Marina would stab back and forth in between her fingers as fast as she could, and she had to get through every knife twice. She inflicted 10 wounds on herself during this performance. The next rhythm was rhythm 5. There's not an order to the numbers. I don't really know why, but it was rhythm 5. For rhythm 5, Marina had constructed a massive 5-point star made out of wood that she soaked in 100 liters of gasoline. Then she set it on fire and walked in a circle, cutting her hair, her fingernails, her toenails, and tossing them into the fire. Marina stepped into the center of the star and laid down in this crucifixion pose. After a long pause, the audience started to get nervous because Marina wasn't moving. Even though they weren't supposed to, the audience ended up intervening and pulling her out of the star. And it's a good thing they did, because the gasoline and the fire basically had sucked all of the oxygen out of the air and she was unconscious. But that did not stop her. The next rhythm was rhythm 2. Rhythm 2 consisted of Marina taking various medications that were designed for schizophrenia. She then filmed her body's reaction in 2 parts over 7 hours. That seems so dangerous, and I don't understand that one. I don't understand a lot of them, honestly. Rhythm 4 was Marina naked in front of this high-powered industrial fan. She was getting all of her air specifically from this fan and inching closer and closer to it as time went on. This was designed to test the limits of her lungs. She passed out again, and in spite of, again, asking no one to intervene, a cameraman ended up stepping in and assisting her because she was unconscious for several minutes and he started to get nervous. And now we get to the juiciest, scariest piece of performance art that I could ever imagine: Rhythm 0. Rhythm 0 is actually a nightmare. It's a nightmare. This performance took place in Naples in 1974. Marina's intention for this piece was to bridge the gap between the artist and the audience and to put the power in the hands of the audience. Immediate now. Rhythm 0 consisted of Marina standing in a room for 6 hours, completely still, just being an object. The general public was allowed to come in and do anything they wanted with her during those 6 hours. There was a long table in the room, and on this table there were 72 different objects. Some of the items were soft and sweet things like honey, feathers, perfume, but then there were items like a box of razor blades, a knife, a gun, and one singular bullet. When the public entered the room, there was a note on the wall that said, "I am the object, I take responsibility." In the beginning, for basically the first half of the show, the guests were really timid. If they used any objects at all, it was the really tame ones like the feather or putting something in her hand. They sprayed her with perfume, pretty random acts to do to a complete stranger. They spent all of this time in line to get into this room and spray her with perfume. But eventually, humanity started to show its ass. People, mainly men, started to come up to her and undress her, rip her clothes off, fondle her in front of the audience. And as they were doing this, Marina was not reacting. The guests started becoming slowly more and more aggressive. Groupthink definitely kicked in, because as the group saw 1 or 2 people being violent and aggressive with her, slapping her, then it seems like more of the group started to become violent and aggressive with her. A now naked Marina sat and endured while someone dug the thorns of a rose into her neck and also into her abdomen. One person even sliced her neck and then started to drink her blood from the wound. What kind of psychopath drinks a stranger's blood? Drinking a stranger's blood is crazy. And don't think the women were innocent. Although the men were more physically involved, the women, their wives, were instructing them on what to do. There were women asking their husbands to violate another woman publicly and in front of them. There were some people that did try to protect her, but the amount of people that were assaulting her was just too much. It's so sad, because although Marina wouldn't allow herself to stop anything that was happening, she was still being traumatized and she was still having an emotional reaction. She looks terrified in the pictures. By the end, Marina was covered in bruises and blood. She was cut and hit with several different objects over 6 hours. The violence only stopped when someone finally took that gun and loaded that single bullet. First, the loaded gun was pointed at Marina's temple, and then it was placed in her hands and pointed toward her chest. A fight ended up breaking out between the people that finally felt like, okay, this is too far, and the people that literally could not control themselves. They were too wrapped up in this mob mentality to think about what they were doing. Someone did end up taking the gun away from Marina, and shortly after that, the show came to an end. When the show ended, Marina actually got up and walked around to talk to these people. She wanted to ask them what they were thinking, how they were feeling, what made them do some of the things that they did. This was like an artistic experiment for her. They were so embarrassed that they were actually running from her. They wouldn't even talk to her. They were basically fleeing the scene. These are the same people that humiliated her publicly for hours on end. And now you have the nerve to be ashamed. Marina has said that she was just an object, that everything they did to her meant nothing of her but everything of them, and that they ran because they couldn't face themselves. I 100% agree with that. Although she was traumatized, Marina did not let that stop her. She did continue to do art. One of her pieces that I really did love was with her husband Ule. 1988, Marina and Ule gave a final goodbye performance. The relationship had run its course, and side messy note that I can't 100% confirm, but supposedly Marina had accused Ule of a lot of infidelity, and one of his final acts of infidelity was during this performance. He supposedly got somebody pregnant. This performance consisted of Marina and Ule flying to China, and they started on opposite ends of the Great Wall of China, and they walked and met each other in the middle for a long hug and a final goodbye. They hugged, they turned around, and they walked the other way for what was supposed to be forever. Ule did end up popping up at one of Marina's performances like 20 years later. People basically lined up to sit across from her in a chair and stare into her eyes for any amount of time that they wanted to, silently. Ule came to that, and it was actually very sweet because they got all teary-eyed, and it was a beautiful moment. Anyway, my personal opinion of Rhythm Zero is that she was very brave, but that would have been a no-go for me. Giving a group of complete strangers total control of your body and then supplying them with weapons, even though she did also supply them with nice, sweet things like perfume, I would just never expect them to do the right thing, and they didn't. I really hope that whatever message she was trying to deliver or who she was trying to reach really reached them, because she put her life on the line for this message. Marina said when she got to her hotel that night and she was looking at herself in the mirror, she found that one of her hairs had grayed, and then after that her hair started graying from the torment of that night. That was when she adopted the signature really dark black hair. She dyed her hair ever since then. That is serious trauma. Even her retelling the story, she was in tears, which had me in tears. It's really sad, and she did not deserve those things that happened to her. What do you think? Could you ever give away complete control like that? Let me know in the comments. Also remember to like, subscribe, comment, share with someone, and I will see you down another rabbit hole.